Hey, Congregation Beth Am, it's Rabbi Rosenberg, and I want to just share a quick lesson from Torah before we enter into Shabbat. This week's Torah portion, Parashat Mishpatim, contains, among other things, the famous passage of an eye for an eye. The Torah tells us that if a person injures another, the injurer shall be punished an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It goes on, a burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, and then it ends by saying, just as they have done to the other person, so shall be done to them. It's a pretty harsh law, to say the least. It's what was technically known as lex talionis, the law of, essentially the law of retribution. And our sages have struggled for literally centuries trying to understand this because they couldn't get their heads around the idea that God's justice would involve this kind of direct revenge. It didn't make any sense to them. And for almost 2,000 years, our rabbis have tried to understand how we can understand this law to not literally mean that we're obligated to physically hurt someone who has physically hurt somebody else. That just doesn't seem to be a way to bring more justice or fairness into the world. And there's been a lot of attempts to have this make sense or to reinterpret it, but my favorite comes from Menachem ben Binyamin Rekanati, who teaches that you have to first understand that when we're told back in the book of Genesis that we were all created b'tselem Elohim, that didn't mean that we were made to look or act like God. It was much more direct than that. He says we're actually all created as part of the supernal being. We're all of God. It's almost like we're all an outline of God in some way, and we're all connected to God through that, very directly connected to God, which means that we're all connected to one another. That every single person, each one of us created b'tselem Elohim, are connected in an almost physical way through that shared connection to God. And so he says that when we hurt somebody else, we are very much, in fact, hurting ourselves. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a burn for a burn is not a threat. It's an observation. If I poke out your eye, I am in some real way, I should understand, poking out my own eye. When the Torah says, just as they have done to the other, so shall be done to them, it's just a fact, it's just an observation. When you hurt someone else, you're hurting yourself. If I hurt someone else, I'm hurting myself. The challenge then is to really believe this. The challenge is to understand that when we hurt someone, we're hurting everyone, including ourselves, including our dearest loved ones. This becomes not a threat to everyone who might injure someone. Instead, it becomes a call to greater humanity, to greater connection, to greater kindness. Every time we do something to hurt someone, physically, emotionally, mentally, in any way, we're really hurting ourselves as well. And the more we believe that, the more careful we're going to be about the feelings and bodies of those around us. So may we all bring this into Shabbat. May we try to live in a way as if we really did believe that hurting someone else is hurting ourselves. And in doing so, may we find a way to do our best to never hurt anyone else. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.